And we continue at 2:06 in the afternoon on the John Phillips Show. Mr. Randy Wang's in Culver City.
John Al writes in, our buddy from the Port of Oakland, reacting to the smoke shop robbery in Brentwood, California. Al says if the local pub-po hear this guy complaining on the news, they're going to come after him with a selling to minors sting like the Alameda PD did to our local shop when the owner refused to turn over video about the 7th robbery when the cops refused to intervene. Shang likes that, so let's hear her say so, guys.
That's right. I like that. That was amazing.
Boy, that's a seedy world, isn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And by that, I don't mean the smoke shops. I mean Shang's office over at Oakland City Hall.
It's a lot of shady stuff that was going on over there.
And we still got our Oakland A's, baby.
No, you don't.
800-222-5222 is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. It is our pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. She is a former member of the California Senate and the California State Assembly, Senator Melissa Melendez. Welcome.
Hey, John. Thanks so much for having me on.
Well, thanks so much for stopping by. Let's start out with the big news here in California, which is that the CARB board is looking to increase the cost of gasoline by as much as 65 cents a gallon starting in July of this year, starting next month. There is a vote in the state assembly that would disallow that from happening. That vote failed. We know that the Democratic majority in Sacramento doesn't want to be blamed for the high cost of gasoline, but they certainly don't want to step in and block that from happening. What do you make of that vote, and what do you make of where we're headed in terms of the cost of gasoline here in California?
I mean, it should come as no surprise to people that Democrats are all talk and no action, because they talk a good game about, wanting to, lower the cost of living for hardworking Californians and the, lower income groups and all of that nonsense, but they don't actually do anything, because there's actually two bills. There's AB 12 and then there's SB 2. They're basically the same bill. And what those bills would do is say these, new low carbon fuel standards that CARB was set to put into effect, it would basically do away with those. So you had two bills, one in the Senate, one in the Assembly, and Democrats want nothing to do with either one of them. So apparently they don't really care about hardworking Californians who are getting squeezed every time they go to fill up their cars and commute to their jobs. So, of course, Newsom, he is certainly not getting involved, but they had a hearing. And this, to me, it's not a surprise, but to the average Californian who doesn't follow all this very closely, it might be kind of shocking. But the regulators said they don't actually analyze how clean the air is due to the environmental policies that the legislature puts in place.
And they also don't take a close look at how much it's going to cost consumers either.
No, that's a zero concern to them. So you've got, these regulations that are going into place soon. And there was a professor, he was at, I want to say, I don't remember which university, but he did an analysis of this and said that because we have two refineries in California that are set to close. And one is the Phillips refinery, which is in Los Angeles, and that's supposed to close by the end of this year. And then there's a Valero refinery in Benicia, California, and that's supposed to close in spring of next year. So you'll have two refineries closing. That covers 20% of California's in-state, gasoline supply. So when he looked at that and he analyzed it, he said, it was UC or USC, I think. Sorry, not that it matters, but it's prominent university. This certainly this professor is can be trusted to do the work, and he said that the gas price surge he thought would be about 70-75% by the end of next year because of the closure of these two refineries. So that means what he's estimating is by Well, when they close the first refinery, gas should go up to about roughly $6.50 a gallon. That's by the end of this year or late this year. But then you close the other one, and that means gas prices per gallon will go up to about $8.50 a gallon. I mean, $8.50 a gallon.
It's under $3 right now in Texas.
Oh, yeah, it's under $3. I mean, I was just in Oklahoma a few months ago, and it was definitely under $3 by a lot. So when Gavin Newsom says, oh, these gas companies, these oil companies, they're gouging Californians, and we're going to get to the bottom of it. Really? Because it seems kind of curious. Why would they only gouge Californians and not the rest of the country? It has nothing to do with oil companies gouging Californians, and has everything to do with the policies that these Democrats are putting in place, and then claiming they don't understand, why people can't afford to live here.
Well, and then you don't have to have a crystal ball to be able to tell what's coming next. In a one-party state where Democrats don't have to worry about losing elections, and the press, which is ideologically on the same side as the Democrats, but also needs access to these Democrats to have access to state government so they can do their jobs, this is what's coming next. Gas prices are going to spike by 65 cents in the short term a gallon, and we're going to start screaming about that and saying it's their fault for doing it. Newsom is going to come out and say, I never signed any legislation raising the gas tax by 65 cents a gallon. What they're doing is spreading misinformation. And then the fact checkers in the press are going to side with Newsom. Newsom never signed legislation jacking up the cost of gasoline by 65 cents a gallon. The Republicans and the people in the right of center media, they're spreading misinformation again, and then they're going to skate.
Right. Well, okay. Technically, he's correct. He didn't actually sign a bill that would raise it by that much, but he also didn't intervene with CARB, the board that he appoints. I mean, these aren't strangers to the governor. These are people that he appoints. In fact, there was a call by it was actually a Democrat legislator, a senator, I believe, and she was making calls for the head of CARB to resign. And Newsom really got his feathers ruffled about that and, kind of called her out on it. But, CARB, they're unelected bureaucrats. They don't answer to anyone other than the governor who appoints them. I mean, I can remember when I was in the assembly, I put a call into CARB about, I don't even remember what it was, something obviously related to gas prices, and they just don't return your call. And that's whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. They don't care. They don't have to answer to you, and they don't. So for Gavin Newsom to put his hands in the air and say, whoa, I didn't have anything to do with this, is complete and utter nonsense.
Well, and Newsom's claim that this is collusion by the oil companies against California, and that's why gas prices are so high here, makes no sense. Because if you are the oil companies and you're going to get together in a smoke-filled room and you're going to decide to spike your profits, but you're only going to target one state, when I guess if you're going to make all of the risks that would be required for colluding with your competition, why not do it to all 50 states if you can make as much money as possible? No, let's pick one at random and let's raise the prices on that one particular state and leave it normal everywhere else. I don't understand who with a brain in their head is believing that.
Well, Democrats are believing that, that's for sure. I mean, look at how our elections are going. But, you're right, it doesn't make any sense because, first of all, California, when it comes to oil and gas, Democrats hate oil and gas companies, so they are heavily scrutinized and constantly having mandates passed down to them. So why in God's name would oil and gas companies do anything to draw more attention to themselves by raising prices and specifically gouging Californians and no one else in the country? This just doesn't add up.
We're speaking with Senator Melissa Melendez. Senator, the Democratic Party of California had their convention this weekend in Orange County, where the topic of conversation, even though she wasn't in attendance, was whether or not former Vice President Kamala Harris would run for governor in 2026 when the seat becomes open. And the consensus, at least among the political reporters who were there from a number of publications, was that there's almost no appetite, at least among the party faithful, among the delegates, for Kamala Harris to run for governor. There was an article that was written in Capital Weekly that quoted an unnamed Democratic strategist when asked about her potential candidacy for governor. Here's what the strategist said. Quote, Kamala peaks on the day she announces her candidacy. The rest is downhill from there, as it always is with her, end quote. What do you make of the lack of appetite for a Kamala Harris candidacy for governor from the Democratic convention in Anaheim?
Well, first of all, she didn't even bother to show up. I mean, she phoned it in, literally phoned it in. She was on the big screen. She had a pre-recorded, 3-minute video or something like that she sent in. So, what kind of message is that sending to the people whose vote you may be seeking that you can't even be bothered to show up and face them in person? I mean, that's ridiculous. I don't think that they appreciated that. I think they saw that as another round of Kamala's elitism, that she doesn't have to meet with people and speak with them and plead her case because of course she should be the nominee and of course they should elect her because she's Kamala. She was the vice president. So I don't think they appreciated that. I think it's more of the same from her. And frankly, she's got a lot of competition. I mean, the lieutenant governor has already said at something she was speaking at that she had 2 goals, that one was of the first female governor was going to be seated in the next election and that female governor was going to be her. So, will she step aside if Kamala gets in? I don't know. Apparently they're friends. But you've got Villaraigosa out there who's just smacking everybody around because he wants to get in the game. And, I don't know, there's 6, 7, 8 contenders in this race, some who have officially announced, some who haven't. That's on the Democrat side. So, Kamala Harris says she's going to, make a decision by the end of summer. Well, maybe she's just trying to, pay down her debt that she still has. I mean, I just got an email from her this morning, technically Barack Obama, saying that he was going to be headlining an event and it was, paid for by the Harris campaign, it says at the bottom. So she's still trying to retire her debt. So maybe she's looking to see if she can get rid of that debt so she can start building up, a new line of debt. I don't know. I think she has a lot of disdain for the average person and the average Californian, and she certainly has shown that by not even showing up to her party's convention.
Well, if you're one of the other Democrats that's running against her and your name ID is nowhere near hers, and they just spent over $1 billion building up her name ID, so none of them are going to come close to her, you're going to have to exploit her vulnerabilities, and you're going to have to do that very aggressively. And I don't know if they have that in them because she was the party's nominee for president. She was the senator from the state of California. She was the attorney general. Many of them appealed to her for endorsements over the years or for her to attend fundraisers for them over the years. So they have personal relationships with her. But they're going to have to go for her jugular if they're going to have any kind of viability. Do you think they're prepared to do that?
The other candidates? Yeah, I do think the other candidates are prepared to do that. But I will say this. Nobody in California, no delegate in California voted for Kamala Harris to be president. In fact, no delegate, it was handed to her. It was a coup. It was by design. So, is she popular in California? Somewhat, but when they did a poll, I don't know if it was USC, but it was a recent poll that they kind of tested her favorabilities. But so her favorability was, I think, around, 50, 52%. But the problem with that poll is they didn't compare her to any other candidates. They just asked specifically about her. So it wasn't kind of a poll that said, okay, well, if, John Phillips and Melissa Melendez and Kamala Harris were running for governor today, who would you choose? No, it wasn't like that. Nobody was given a choice. It was just, what did you think of Kamala Harris? That's a very different poll than when you stack her up against other candidates. So, Californians didn't much care for her the first time she decided to run for president, nor did the rest of the country. So I don't know that she's as popular as her campaign is making her out to be, or Politico, or any of the other media outlets that have been trying to prop her up, much like they did with Joe Biden.
There are two prominent Republicans running for governor right now, Steve Hilton and the sheriff out in Riverside County, Chad Bianco. I do believe there is another bold-faced name who could be jumping into the race, someone with close ties to the Trump administration. If so, that could split the vote to a point to where the Democrats end up with two candidates on the November ballot, and then it becomes a race about personality and not about policy. How important is it for the California Republican Party to come up with some plan, some process to make sure that there's only one candidate on the ballot in the primary, maybe like a pre-primary of sorts, to weed out the weaker candidates so that there is a debate in the fall over the direction of the state that is about something other than personality or gender?
Yeah, I think that's very important. They should, start to align some polling to find out, okay, who has the most likely chance, and then have a sit down with the other candidates about the reality of the situation and the, viability of winning a race. Because splitting the vote, why would we hand it over to the Democrats? It's already a tough state for a Republican to win in anyway. But, again, it's sometimes very hard to convince a candidate who really believes in their candidacy to step aside and get out of the race. But that is most certainly what needs to be done. And, I think when you present candidates with facts, with data, look, here's what we found out when we ran your name, when we ran this other person's name. Here's where you stand with the people of California. And it's not very high. And do you think you're going to be able to raise enough money to, build up your favorabilities? If the answer is no to that, then you're hurting the party by continuing with this, and you ought to just help the candidate that's, has the greatest potential of winning. So that is my hope, that that's what the party does. Again, that's not always easy to do, especially when you have very strong personalities in there, but that's certainly what needs to be done, because this state, $8 for a gallon of gas pretty soon is, that pretty much hurts everybody, and it only goes down from there, and something has to be done.
Senator Melissa Melendez. You can follow her on X at Senator Melendez. Senator, thanks so much for stopping by. Always a pleasure.
Anytime. My pleasure, John. Thank you.
If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, with the end of the show quickly approaching, if you want to continue listening to us after we sign off at 3, that's easy to do.
All you got to do is search for The John Phillips Show wherever you get your podcasts, whether it's the Apple Podcast app, iHeart, Spotify. Search for The John Phillips Show, hit subscribe, and you can download all of the episodes. You can also do what George Gascon does to himself in the middle of the night.
Do a Google on YouTube.
And you can like and subscribe there. If you like every episode, apparently it makes more people see it on YouTube. So do that.
In the meantime, what do you say we make a couple of listeners very happy?
790 KABC welcomes Jeff Tate's Operation Mindcrime, the final chapter at the Saban Theater on November 14th. Tickets are on sale now at AXS.com, but right now, caller number 9 at 1-888-790-5222 gets a pair of tickets to the show. Tickets furnished by the Saban at the Canyon, where music meets the soul. Good luck dialing.
Well, despite the fact that the city of Long Beach spends a fortune on homeless services, their homeless population, Randy, continues to rise.
Funny how that works. Long Beach experiencing an uptick in homelessness, which I find very interesting because Long Beach is actually admitting their numbers. City of Los Angeles and the County of Los Angeles, very quiet about those LAHSA numbers, aren't they?
Very, very, very quiet. Quiet like a church mouse.
For more on Long Beach's homeless problem, thanks, Rex Rickerson, here is NBC4.
Meantime, homelessness is on the rise in the city of Long Beach. New numbers just released show more homeless people than the year before. And that's despite the city investing more than $135 million toward that problem.
By the way, there's only like 3,000 homeless people in Long Beach. Couldn't you have cut them all a check for $40,000 and say, get the hell out of here?
No, but then you don't pay off your friends.
McCollum Medina has been following the numbers and this story. He's live in Long Beach with more. Mac.
Annabelle, we're seeing an increase of 6.5% according to the city. That's about 219 more homeless people in Long Beach this year opposed to last year. And this comes after a failed tiny home project that could cost taxpayers here in Long Beach millions of dollars.
A failed tiny home project?
I wonder if all of those programs are scams. Because don't forget, that's what the Dongs were involved with up in Oakland with their buddy Shang.
They had a program that they were selling to cities, not just Oakland, but also San Leandro and the rest of the East Bay. And it was a scheme where they were buying shipping containers and converting them into homeless housing, but we're going to sell each shipping container, which they got for pennies on the dollar, to these cities for about $300,000 a pop, and had Sheng commit to buy 100 of them.
Yeah. I smell a rat.
That was why they were willing to put Andre, her boyfriend, on the payroll for $300,000 a year, and then his pay would increase the more shipping containers they sold.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, that sounds totally legal.
You got to look at every contract, every grant for anyone that says they're invested in building homeless housing.
No, it all seems like a scam.
Is Long Beach failing at this?
You have to look at the number of people we brought out of homelessness.
No, you're failing on this, Rex.
You know, as bad as all of these other mayors are, whether it's Sheng or London Breed or Karen Bass or Todd Gloria in San Diego, this guy, Rex Richardson, doesn't get enough attention. Long Beach, which lives in the shadow of Los Angeles, we think of as being kind of a small town. It's the size of Atlanta. And this guy is totally out to lunch. He's just as left-wing and just as malicious as the rest of them, but he skates because no one ever shines the light on what's going on. But you look at a failure like this, you look at how much money Long Beach is dumping into homelessness and how the problem is getting worse, he should lose his job over that.
You have to look at the number of people we brought out of homelessness.
Mayor Rex Richardson saying that number, just over 3,000 people now in permanent housing over the last 2 years, shows the city's progress. Still, though, the numbers of...
You mean the permanent housing that we don't require to be sober for, so we're pretty much warehousing people to die in overdoses inside motels?
You're spending more, and the problem is getting worse. How is that progress?
Shows the city's progress. Still, though, the numbers of those without homes continues to grow in Long Beach, 3,595 during the January 23rd homeless count this year. That's up from 3,376 homeless in January of last year, which saw its first decline in 7 years. The city says 167 people reported being somehow impacted by the January fires.
In Long Beach?
Oh, come on. Next thing you know, they'll blame it on COVID.
According to city data that we requested, Long Beach has allocated nearly $55 million for this fiscal year to address the homeless problem, a total of $135 million since 2020 for homeless initiatives.
And where's that money gone exactly?
If they're accepting the fact that Long Beach has a homeless problem because of the fires in Pacific Palisades, that means people don't want to know the truth.
Well, I think it's pretty obvious what the truth is. Much like the rest of any end-of-the-line city on Metro, Long Beach has a hard time getting the homeless out of there because they come in every day by train.
So from his point of view, well, the ones that are here we're doing things for, but more keep coming in every single day, but you can't blame that on me.
23% of which is going to permanent housing. The city opting to spend nearly $70 million on interim housing, like the Vagabond Motel near downtown Long Beach, and $43 million of city.
Can we stop with this whole Project Room Key, Project Home Key nonsense of converting motels that are in areas that are not zoned for this, that are supposed to be commercial corridors, or downtown Long Beach, a place where people are supposed to live and play and walk around and go to Gladstones, and you're putting a homeless shelter right there?
I love the fact that they all pretend to be surprised when the homeless destroy these buildings.
Like the Vagabond Motel near downtown Long Beach, and $43 million of city, state, and federal funding for the Project Home Key facilities, like where the mayor held a roundtable discussion today, the same facility that had 20 deaths from 2021 to 2024.
In one Long Beach Project Home Key motel, 20 people died.
And he calls that progress.
The same facility that had 20 deaths from 2021 to 2024. The city said in earlier statements the leading cause of those deaths, where a cause was determined, was cancer.
Cancer, you say?
So if that's true, which I'm not sure because we know what the leading cause of death is in any homeless housing, ask what's going on in San Francisco's. When there's a vacancy in the SROs in the Tenderloin, it's because someone got carried out in a body bag. But if it is cancer, so are all the services we're paying for not screening people for cancer?
Well, if they're all dying of cancer, that means that building must be under the biggest power lines you've ever seen. Or what it is a hospice care facility that's probably not staffed as such.
In February of this year, the city decided to return a $5.6 million state grant for tiny homes because they could not find a location to house those homes.
They applied for a grant from the state, and that's why Gavin Newsom is to blame for so much of this, because this is all his idea. Project Room Key, Project Home Key. He offers these grants that convert these motels into homeless housing, and it does not solve the problem, but cities and counties are addicted to the money. That's what's going on in Torrance right now. The entire city of Torrance voted against this Project Room Key motel that was near a school, and the LA County Board of Supervisors steamrolled it through anyway because they want the money.
And in Long Beach, they're applying for grants for something they don't have the room for.
The city manager saying the problem was they spent $2.9 million buying the homes and the services to search for the space.
You bought the homes without land for them?
That seems prudent.
Why don't you put them in Rex Richardson's backyard?
Oh, I'd love to see that.
That money will now have to come from the general fund, taxpayer money, to pay back the state.
We're actually getting a lot of interest from other cities that we can turn around and sell those back and recoup some of that investment.
Wait, so now you're in the business of selling tiny homes?
They're having a fire sale.
Rex Richardson is now the Cal Worthington of tiny homes?
Hey, Carson, you want to buy some tiny homes? Lakewood, tiny homes?
We stock them deep and sell them cheap.
Other spending we asked about came from an NBC4 record request of the homeless budget from February of 2023 to 24, where the city spent $59 million. $209,000 was spent on encampment cleanups. Nearly $1,600 spent on Domino's Pizza.
What?
Well, the homeless have to eat too, or maybe the people running those phony baloney homeless organizations have to eat, and they prefer Domino's.
Nearly $1,600 spent on Domino's Pizza, and just under $20,000 spent on Greyhound.
Are we shipping homeless people out of Long Beach?
Yes, we do have quite a few people that choose to return to a community that they called home previously.
Okay, that's money well spent.
Yeah, that's something we should be investing heavily on. Why is it our responsibility, if you live in a place like Long Beach or San Francisco, why is your tax dollars have to be responsible for some jackass from Ohio that came here to get high?
I'll tell you, I would place one regulation on purchasing Greyhound tickets for the homeless. Every single ticket has to be one way only. It's like that old Elvis Presley song, Return to Sender.
And the number is also released, so there's a slight decrease when it comes to people experiencing chronic homelessness and also a decrease in veterans who are homeless here in Long Beach. In Long Beach, I'm Akala Medina, NBC4 News.
There you go. You're doing a great job, Rex.
These people are buffoons. And what the hell is that city council doing down there, where you've got a mayor that's going around doing this, and you're silent? Pathetic, Long Beach. Pathetic. If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, you're monitoring the mailbag.
Michael in Fullerton writes in at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. I wish to propose the new and improved John, Randy, and Michael Homeless Action Charity. Of course, the operating the agency will require about 98% of the government grants to operate the charity. Nah, I guess not. We own our own souls.
I'm telling you, the answer to our problem is one-way tickets on Greyhound and Spirit Airlines.
That's cruel and unusual punishment.
Well, I'm willing to do that. All right, let's go to the phones and welcome Ted in La Cañada. Ted, hello.
I spent the day, John, figuring out how I can spread this 37% insurance increase over my rental properties. And it works out to about $200 on an average for the properties I own. Who can afford this? They're going to come back so much on landlords now because we have to keep pace with the insurance industry. That is, it should be the subject of a show.
Well, and more hikes are on the way. The moment that State Farm was granted their ability to increase rates, they went back a week later and asked for another rate increase. Well, what do you think is going to happen when landlords get hit again with another increase? And if you talk about quote unquote future forecasting, well, you know your insurance rates are only going to go one way. So when you raise the rent, you may have to raise it even more than that $200 because you know that within 12 months, your insurance rates are going to be going up yet again. So why not raise it $400 because you know that's what's coming?
Well, to raise it $400, you're going to have rent control come back because people are going to complain. I've suffered through Santa Monica, losing a bunch of buildings that I owned because people, I couldn't pay the mortgage payments anymore. They kicked back the rent 18 months on the Berkeley rent control edict. It's unbelievable. And you're going to have a lot of anger at this, and it's not our fault, the landlord.
Well, I'll tell you, I don't know if you saw the article in Axios, and it was a national article, but whenever there's a national article talking about national numbers, California is overrepresented because we're so much larger than all the other states. But right now, it's the first time in human history, or in United States history, I guess I should say, that the number of units for sale has increased over the number of potential buyers on the market or gotten to this level. I should have the article out in front of me. I don't. But you get the idea where there is a glut of units on the market and there's only a handful of people looking to buy right now. Well, part of the reason that so many people are selling their properties, which increased in value through COVID dramatically, is because they can't afford the costs associated with those properties, which includes insurance. Insurance, I think, is motivating people to sell properties right now that they would otherwise like to hang on to.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it is scary to me because I went through Santa Monica where landlords would just not rent anymore because they couldn't make any money. So they would just tie the buildings up, even on San Vicente Boulevard, which is a premier area. And that's going to happen in Los Angeles. And there'll be a drive to kill, the landlord because of what the gas companies are doing and everybody else is doing.
Well, the landlord's the one that's easy to blame. When the insurance company's raising the rates or the gas company's raising the rates or whatever is going on behind the scenes is going on, they don't typically see that. But when the landlord says your rent is going up, it's easy to blame that person. Easy to blame Mr. Furley. Thanks for the call, sir.